Have you ever been curious to know whether it still makes sense to learn coding if you want to go into finance? Where should you start and what languages might be the most useful? Well, as a tenured university economics professor within the business school, I have been researching, teaching, and coding for almost 20 years now. 10 years in training in econ and math, and 10 years as a professor. More recently, in finance. I'm trained in C, MATLAB, R, multiple versions, Stata, eViews, RATS, Fortran, you name it. With operating systems, with Microsoft, with OS X Apple, with Unix systems as well. I've also got a lot of training during my PhD and also during my professorship with high performance cluster systems. Servers, things like batch programming, like simple Linux utility resource management or Slurm, parallel programming, CUDA for graphics programming. So my current focus really is on Python, AI, and the strategy system development expertise. In this video, I'm going to share my experience and thoughts on the future for coding in finance. And if you want to stay ahead of the curve and get my latest videos as soon as they come out, all totally free by the way, then click on that subscribe bell notification below. Thank you so much, you guys, and let's get straight to it. So what's the difference between coding and programming? Well, coding, you are writing code in a programming language. You know, it could be something like C, C++, or something even older like Fortran back when I was a dinosaur. It could also be more modern languages like Python. Whereas programming, you're really thinking more in terms of systems. It's broader processes such as designing, developing, and maintaining software. Now, a big game changer has been AI, and in particular, something like ChatGPT. So it used to be the case that when you're coding, you'd have to go through either courses or you could read these kind of books like I used to do when I was an undergraduate, and even as a graduate student. Of course, there were online tools available such as Google Search, and you also have Stack Overflow. However, today it can be a lot faster to really go and ask ChatGPT to help you debug a lot of the code. So this has made it a lot more accessible. So rather than having to, read through some textbook on a particular code, the first time you learn a language is going to be most difficult, most challenging. But a lot of the rudiments of one language, the actual system, does kind of spill over. It makes it a little bit easier to learn your second language. Still, once you've really learned one language, at this point, you can probably use ChatGPT to help you out with certain languages and certain debugging. Python is particularly good with ChatGPT, and also R and some other languages too. But it is a game changer, the AI and ChatGPT. It is now no longer necessary to read books. This really makes it a lot easier, right? Rather than having to read books on massively parallel programming like I was doing when I was a PhD student, be it on cores on a computer or be it on graphical cores, say CPUs or graphical GPUs. You can now, for the main part, read a lot with ChatGPT. So what is the best? Well, in finance, typically you might be using something like Bloomberg. Now, to pull your data from Bloomberg, you can do it manually at first, perhaps even using something like Excel and some of the add-ons. But ultimately, what you kind of want to be graduating towards is something like an API, or application programming interface. This allows something like R or Python or other languages to communicate with the particular online database you're searching from. For instance, you could be getting your data from, in crypto, it could be like Bybit or Binance. In stocks, it could be something like Yahoo Finance or even Alpaca. Or if you're looking at more fundamental data, you could be thinking about something like end of day, EOD, historical database, so EOD-HD. They all have APIs. Now, a wrapper is even easier. Not the singer or the rapper, but actually even easier than using something like an API is to use a wrapper, because APIs are changing quite a lot and there can be some instabilities and they take a little bit longer. A wrapper is a bit faster and a bit easier. Things are continuously getting easier and easier. So it's almost like the longer you put off doing things, the easier it's going to become. Computers are faster, more and more memory, and easier to code, less work on the human. Now for Bloomberg, I have personally found programs like R, as well as programming languages like Python, particularly useful in finance. As I've continued, I've kind of graduated from R towards more and more towards Python. I'm noticing that it seems to be used more and more. Now it's going to depend on if you're going to work for a company, they will basically tell you what software that the founder or the people in the company use, and you'll probably be told to use that particular software. But R or Python are excellent these days. And I think if I had to choose one, I would probably err towards Python. But that's just me. Now, in terms of an integrated development environment, so something you can code with, like an editor that also does some compiling, etc. You can, you can use different editors, and then you can have compilers that are separate. So when I was doing everything back in the Stone Age, that's how I did. We were looking at different versions, like different compilers were faster than other compilers. Maybe you were using a Mac, and you had different compilers like Intel compilers or Windows, you had some Intel compilers, you had like GNU, GCC. But one of my favorites was Atom. It's such a pity that GitHub recently discontinued in 2022, discontinued Atom, which had been going back as far as 2008. And I found that really, really helpful, that particular IDE. So GitHub is a web-based platform used by software developers to store, share, and collaborate on code projects using a system called Git. And GitHub formerly maintained Atom, which I found amazing. Unfortunately, it's not something I can advise anymore because it's really no longer being supported. You could write a lot of different languages in Atom. Now, I have found Jupyter, although it's quite basic, I found Jupyter quite useful for just doing snippets of code, building up coding for finance, being able to visualize things pretty quickly. It comes built in with Anaconda's version of Python. Very, very useful indeed. And you can do quite a lot with Jupyter notebooks. And they are system independent. So it doesn't matter whether you're looking at a Mac OS or whether you're looking at Windows or you've got some kind of Linux system. You can also use Google Colab in the cloud as well. That can be really helpful. If you really want something that's a bit more professional, you could think about Visual Studio. This is the one that's heavily advised by a lot of people. Or even something like PyCharm for Python. And there are a plethora of other ones. These are ones that I've tended to find the best. I do find that PyCharm is really good for some debugging. I find Visual Studio has a lot of power, but it's a little bit harder to get into. Once you get into it, it definitely has more power. Jupyter is good at the start. It can be very good to build up code, and you used to have to do a lot of stuff in Visual Studio, but I see more and more as ChatGPT is aiding us with these systems. Unless you're coding a massive project, Jupyter is probably all you're going to need, unless you're like a full-time coder. That's what you want to do. So you're into finance and you're thinking, should I learn coding? Is it worth it? Well, the old answer up till 5 minutes ago would have been yes, absolutely. I would have said, yeah, there's one set of skill of being really good at finance, there's another set of skill of being really good at coding, and often the two don't interact. You can see going back even 15, 20 years ago, it was a rarity to have both coding and finance. It was like a superpower. Now more and more trading seems to be done using automation, using algorithmic trading, etc. And it's kind of difficult if you have no knowledge of coding. You can survive, you can do well in certain firms, especially more fundamental trading firms and more swing trading firms, things like that. But at day trading, and other things, it seems to be at least with the execution. Now, usually you'll be working with the coders, so you're probably not going to be the one doing the coding in a lot of these firms. But if this is something that you want to do as a retail trader, so you're at home, maybe coding is something that you might want to get into a little bit. It does give you a little bit of an edge, or so I found. The new answer is, it depends, right? So NVIDIA's CEO, Jensen Huang, recently commented that, it may not always be necessary to become proficient at coding. And I think that that's quite true. I think in the sense now that the more we have ChatGPT and AI, yeah, there are some people that their task is to develop more bots, to develop chat GPT bots, and to develop the AI. And there's definitely going to be people doing programming, and that's, it's not going to end right now. Although coding is, by AI itself now, is getting very, very good, very creative. But in terms of you, if you just want to go into finance, having to be like a super duper computer geek, if you're, like me with Fortran, or you've got high performance computing and coding, that's great, that's powerful, you still have a little bit of an edge. It's just that, don't be scared about this, in the sense that now you can use ChatGPT to help you out quite a lot. I know a lot of people, and I can't name names here, but I know a lot of people in the investment industry, some of the top companies, where they've now using ChatGPT for pretty much everything. Like, they're getting it to help. Now, of course, they had the background first, so they understood how to code in the beginning. So if you have no background in coding, ChatGPT can be very confident and can mislead you. That is the one side, is that as an expert, you'll have to be able to recognize when ChatGPT gets things wrong. So it's good to have a foundational level, maybe like the equivalent of 1 or 2 terms in college at the very minimum, in terms of coding. So, after all of that, is it worth it? Overall, I am of the opinion that you should have some coding knowledge, and that you should be implementing some of that in finance. So, here's why. There's a lot of positives. First, you can automate repetitive tasks. For instance, executing trade. You don't really want to be relying on your emotion too much when you're executing trade. Also, the speed at which, and making mistakes, human errors all the time, right? You can see this, I think it's really famous in one of Antoine Creel, the trader, one of his TV shows, where one of the novice investors says the wrong thing, buy when it should be sell, or sell when it should be buy. It's also really good for data collection, especially when you look at speedy data collection, and also when you look at large data collection. Just, you want to minimize human error as much as possible. And for performance analytics, it really saves you time there. So it's saving time. It's not just repetitive tasks, also saving time, reducing human error, emotion getting in your way, and also ensures consistency, reproducibility, and making sure that you're doing the same thing across every front. It can turn what could take weeks and multiple people into just seconds, right? Next, you could think about leveraging real-time and historical data using coding. You can test strategies on a large, long sample. The longer the better. You could have a big sample, but the better thing is having it over a period of time. Of course, there are structural breaks and things, and so there's a bit of argument over whether it should be long, but my personal experience as a researcher for the last decade or two is that the longer the sample is better than just having a wider sample in certain circumstances. There's more information to be gathered, usually from a longer sample. So the time domain is usually slightly more important. That's what I've seen personally in finance. Again, this is not investment advice. If you want investment advice, you should consult a licensed professional. This is just my personal experience and my personal opinion. You can also use more speed in terms of WebSockets for pulling, not just the APIs. WebSockets can be even faster for big data scraping. You can use machine learning for identifying a statistically significant edge. It's all about edges, right? Real edgy profession. But we're looking at data-driven, unemotional decision-making. Really, that's where the money is made here. Not making decisions based on your own personal opinion all the time, but looking at data. It really shines when you got back testing, so going back in time, and also optimizing your strategies at scale. When you're scripting tests of thousands of different variations, let's say entry or exit rules, what parameters, let's say if you're looking at a crossover strategy, how far back do you want to go with the lags before you ever consider risking real money. Now, you can also use the cloud. That would avoid a local crash on your computer, and it avoids local internet outages too. It's available 24/7. You can think about strategies and bots. Now, some cloud servers I found useful were things like Amazon Web Services, AWS, or Azure, or Google Cloud. These are quite scalable and they're secure. They do come with a price. There's also VPS providers such as DigitalOcean and Linode for lighter use. Now, in these situations, the system never sleeps. It just scales on demand. And you can get some feedback with logs and dashboards. There's databases, you can visualize everything, and you get alerts too. Databases are really important for putting everything together. Visualizing really helps you kind of construct your strategy, and alerts also just let you know things are going and things are being executed, everything's happened. It really does help you refine your strategy over time and hone it, because you do, and the strategy's not going to work forever. So it helps you also maintain accountability. And finally, with AI and machine learning, you've really got a lot of edge discovery, discovering where it is that you can be your own casino, or optimally position sizing, or uncovering some non-linear relations, and so on and so forth. So some other advantages and why it matters. Well, first, speed and precision, right? The code reacts faster than humans. It's crucial for options trading and high frequency trading. Second, you've got scalability. You can monitor thousands of ticker symbols of different stocks and run millions of simulations in discovering your strategy and also making sure your strategy is up to speed. Third, it's also cost effective. You don't really need necessarily a Bloomberg terminal these days. Could use something like EOD, historical database for fundamentals, and maybe Yahoo Finance and a few other things as well. Open source tools like Yahoo Finance for a certain amount of things are very powerful. You've also got 24/7 operations, right? You can trade international markets and crypto without any manual input. You can be trading when you're sleeping. Now, I'm not always suggesting that you go away and you sip coffee in another room. It's good to maintain, looking over the code, making sure, but you can set up alerts a lot of the time on your phone. You can set alerts on your computer, and all kinds of errors and debugs and things for crashing and what to do and help. So as long as you have it really well set up, it's all about the design of the system. Again, a lot of the time goes into designing the system. And finally, you've got the competitive edge. You have become your own quant desk. Tools that pros use are now highly accessible to the average retail trader. Like, comment, and subscribe for more.